There's something fundamentally wrong about being awake when the world sleeps. The fluorescent lights hum a different frequency, shadows fall at unnatural angles, and the people you encounter, they're not quite the same as the ones you'd meet during the day. Tonight I'm sharing 4 true stories from night shift workers, stories they've never been able to forget. Stories that made them walk away from jobs they desperately needed. These aren't urban legends. These are documented experiences from real people. And after you hear what happened to them, you might understand why some positions stay perpetually vacant. Let's begin. Our first story comes from Marcus Thompson, a 34-year-old security guard who worked the overnight shift at St. Catherine's Hospital in rural Pennsylvania from 2019 to 2020. Marcus's job was simple: patrol the hallways every hour, monitor the security cameras, and ensure all exits remained locked after visiting hours. The hospital had been built in 1947, and while most of it had been renovated, the basement level, where Marcus spent most of his shift, retained its original structure. For the first 3 months, nothing unusual happened. Marcus would make his rounds, check in with the night nurses, and spend the rest of his time in the security office watching Netflix between camera checks. But on February 14, 2020, everything changed. It was 2:47 a.m. when Marcus noticed something odd on camera 6, the feed that monitored the old psychiatric wing, which had been closed since 2003. The camera showed a flickering light in one of the rooms, as if someone was inside with a flashlight. Marcus radioed the night supervisor, but she told him it was probably just a reflection. Still, protocol required him to investigate. He took the service elevator down to the basement level. The psychiatric wing was accessed through a long corridor that smelled of mildew and old paint. Marcus had only been down there twice before, and both times during the day. As he approached the wing's entrance, he noticed the security door, which should have been locked, was slightly ajar. The light he'd seen on the camera was coming from room 217, about halfway down the hall. Marcus called out. No response. He pushed open the door to 217. The room was empty, but sitting in the middle of the floor was a child's music box, the kind that plays when you open the lid. It was open, playing a distorted version of Brahms' Lullaby. Marcus would later tell investigators that he'd never been more certain of anything in his life. That music box had not been there 30 seconds earlier when he'd looked through the door's window. But here's what made Marcus quit. As he bent down to pick up the music box, he saw something in his peripheral vision. In the corner of the room where the shadows were deepest, there was a figure, small, child-sized, completely still. Marcus spun around with his flashlight. Nothing there. He swept the light across every corner. Empty. That's when he heard it from the hallway behind him. The sound of multiple doors opening and closing in sequence, like someone was moving from room to room very quickly. But the hallway had been empty when he'd walked down it. Marcus ran. He didn't look back. He took the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator, and he didn't stop running until he reached the main lobby. When security footage was reviewed the next day, it showed Marcus entering the psychiatric wing. It showed him standing in the doorway of room 217 for exactly 12 seconds before sprinting away. But here's the thing that made this story verifiable and truly disturbing. The camera never showed Marcus bending down. It never showed him looking at anything on the floor. From the camera's perspective, Marcus walked up to an empty room, stood perfectly still as if frozen, and then suddenly bolted. But there's more. When maintenance was sent to investigate the following morning, they found the music box. It was real. It had Marcus's fingerprints on it. But according to hospital records, that music box had been logged into evidence storage in 1987 after a patient in that exact room had used it to lure a nurse into a violent altercation. The evidence storage room was on a different floor. The door had been locked and required a key card to access. Security footage showed no one had entered that storage room in over 3 months. Marcus submitted his resignation the next day. He now works construction during the day. When I contacted him for this video, he had only one thing to say. Whatever was in that room knew I was coming. It prepared something just for me, and I don't ever want to know what would have happened if I'd stayed. Our second story takes us to a 24-hour gas station off Interstate 70 in rural Colorado. The kind of place that exists solely to serve long-haul truckers and travelers who miscalculated their fuel. Sarah Mitchell was 22 years old when she took the graveyard shift at mile marker 219. The pay was decent, the work was easy, and most importantly, she could study for her nursing degree between customers. The station was isolated. The nearest town was 14 miles west. Cell reception was spotty. And during winter months, Sarah would sometimes go 2 or 3 hours without seeing a single customer. But she didn't mind the solitude. What she minded was the man in the brown jacket. He first appeared on November 3rd, 2018 at exactly 3:33 a.m. Sarah would remember the time because it appeared on the security footage that would later be reviewed by state police. The man walked up to the glass door but didn't come inside. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring directly at Sarah. His face was partially obscured by the hood of his jacket, but Sarah could see enough to know something was wrong. His expression was completely blank, no emotion, just staring. After about 2 minutes, he walked away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the parking lot lights. Sarah was unnerved but tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was deciding whether to come in. People do weird things at 3 a.m., but he came back. The next night, same time. 3:33 a.m., same position outside the door, same blank stare. This time he stayed for 5 minutes before walking away. Sarah called her manager the next day. He told her to call the police if the man came back. He also mentioned something that made Sarah's blood run cold. Another girl who worked that shift a few years ago mentioned seeing someone like that. She quit after a week. Night 3. 3:33 a.m. He returned. But this time Sarah was ready. She had the non-emergency police number ready to dial. She had the panic button within reach. She'd locked the door and put up the prepay only sign. The man approached as before, stood in the same spot, stared. But this time he reached up and knocked on the glass. 3 times, slowly, deliberately. Sarah didn't move. She'd been instructed not to engage. The man knocked again, 3 times. Then he pressed his face against the glass. Sarah would later tell police that this was when she saw his eyes clearly for the first time. She described them as not right. Later, when pressed for details, she said they didn't reflect light the way I should. They looked flat, painted on. The man pulled back from the glass, and then he smiled. Sarah hit the panic button. She called 911. The dispatcher told her a unit was 20 minutes away and to stay inside and keep the doors locked. But here's what made Sarah quit. What made this story more than just an encounter with a creepy stranger. The man walked around the building. Sarah watched on the security monitors as he moved methodically, testing each window, trying each door, the back door, the storage room, the bathroom window, and then he disappeared from the cameras. Sarah waited. 5 minutes, 10, 15. The police arrived at 4:02 a.m. They searched the property. No one was there. They checked the security footage and confirmed Sarah's account. They saw the man. They saw him circle the building. But here's what they found that made this a criminal investigation. On the back door, the employee entrance that was supposedly locked, there were fresh scratch marks around the lock. Someone had tried to pick it recently, and when they reviewed the security footage more carefully, frame by frame, they found something that Sarah had missed in her panic. At 3:47 a.m., while Sarah was on the phone with 911, there's a single frame, 1/24th of a second, where a figure can be seen inside the store, behind Sarah, in the storage room doorway. The figure is blurry, but it's wearing a brown jacket. The storage room door had been locked. Sarah had the only key. When police checked the storage room, they found the door unlocked, and on the floor, arranged in a careful line, were items from the stockroom: a pack of cigarettes, a lighter, a bottle of accelerant, and a handwritten note that said, "Next time." The man in the brown jacket was never identified. The case remains open. The gas station installed additional security measures, but they had trouble keeping overnight staff. Sarah moved back home to Ohio. She works at a hospital now. During the day, she told me that she still checks her locks 3 times before bed, and she never ever opens her door after dark without looking through the peephole first. The worst part, she said, is knowing he got inside while I was there, and I never knew until I saw that footage. What was he doing in that storage room? How long was he there? And what would have happened if the police had arrived 5 minutes later? Corporate office buildings are strange places at night. Hundreds of people spend their days in these spaces, filling them with noise and energy and life. But after 6 p.m., they become something else entirely. Jamal Rodriguez knew this better than anyone. For 4 years, he worked as a night cleaner for a commercial cleaning company in downtown Seattle. His route included 12 floors of a financial services building, cubicles, conference rooms, executive offices. The work was monotonous but peaceful. Jamal would put on podcasts and move through the building methodically. He'd seen it all: forgotten birthday cakes, confidential documents left on printers, even the occasional couple who'd stayed late for overtime. But on the 11th floor, things were different. The 11th floor housed the IT department. During the day, it was the busiest floor in the building. Dozens of employees managing servers, handling cybersecurity, keeping the company's digital infrastructure running. But at night, something felt wrong up there. Jamal noticed it immediately when the floor was added to his route in September 2020. The air was colder, the motion sensor lights took longer to activate, and there was a smell he couldn't quite place, something metallic and stale. But the strangest thing was the computers. Even though everyone had gone home, several computers on the 11th floor would still be on. Not in sleep mode, fully active. Screens illuminated with what looked like lines of code scrolling endlessly. Jamal asked his supervisor about it. "IT stuff," he was told. "Servers running overnight. Don't worry about it." But Jamal did worry about it. Because those weren't servers, those were regular workstations, and the code scrolling across the screens wasn't diagnostic software or automated processes. It was chat logs, conversations, and they were happening in real time. On October 14th, Jamal made a decision that would eventually lead to his resignation. He stopped in front of one of the active computers and read what was on the screen. It was a chat window, the kind employees might use to communicate internally, but the conversation didn't make sense. The messages were fragmented, nonsensical. Things like, "Can you see me now? I'm still here. It's so cold. Please help. Why won't anyone answer?" Jamal's first thought was that someone was pranking him. Maybe employees had left these messages as a joke, knowing the cleaning crew would see them. But then a new message appeared while he was standing there. "I can see you, Jamal." He stepped back from the computer. His heart was racing. Someone was messing with him. They had to be. Maybe there were cameras and someone was watching remotely. He looked around the floor. The lights were still on from when he'd entered, but the rows of cubicles were empty. Silent. Another message appeared on the screen. "Why do you come here?" Jamal should have left. He should have walked straight to the elevator and reported this to building security. But something made him stay. Maybe curiosity, maybe disbelief, maybe the part of his brain that insisted there had to be a rational explanation. He reached out and typed a response. "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "I don't know anymore." And then another message. "I've been here so long." And another. "Do you know what day it is?" Jamal tried to close the chat window, but it wouldn't close. He tried to shut down the computer. The power button did nothing. That's when he noticed the employee photo clipped to the cubicle wall. The nameplate read, "David Chen, Senior Systems Analyst." Jamal pulled out his phone and did something he probably shouldn't have. He searched the name David Chen and the company name. What he found made his hands shake. David Chen had worked on the 11th floor. He'd been a senior systems analyst, and he died. In August 2019, David had suffered a fatal heart attack at his desk on the 11th floor at 11:47 p.m. He'd been working late. Alone. His body wasn't discovered until the next morning. Jamal was staring at the screen, processing this information, when every computer on the floor turned on simultaneously. All of them. Dozens of monitors blazing to life in the darkness. And every single screen displayed the same message: "I'm still here." Jamal ran. He left his cleaning cart, his supplies, everything. He took the stairs instead of the elevator, 11 flights, and he didn't stop until he was outside the building. He called his supervisor from the street. He told her what happened. She thought he was high or having a breakdown, but when building security checked the 11th floor, they found something that corroborated Jamal's story. Every computer on the floor was on. And every single one was logged into David Chen's account, an account that had been deactivated in September 2019. The IT department couldn't explain it. They brought in cybersecurity consultants. They checked for hacks, viruses, remote access. Nothing. But they did find one thing in the system logs that no one could explain. Between 11 p.m. and midnight, every night since David Chen's death, there was network activity from his workstation, searches, document access, even emails drafts that were never sent. Someone or something had been using his computer every night for over a year. The company moved the entire IT department to a different floor the following month. They claimed it was for renovation purposes. Jamal requested to be reassigned to a different building. When that request was denied, he quit. He now works maintenance at a school during the day. When I spoke to him, he was reluctant to go into detail, but he did say this: "I don't care what the IT people said about Ghost in the Machine or whatever technical explanation they tried to give. I know what I saw. Someone was in that computer, someone who didn't know they were dead, and they've been trying to get help for over a year, but no one was there to see the messages. Until me." Our final story takes place in a distribution warehouse in Memphis, Tennessee. This is where our journey ends, with perhaps the most disturbing account of all. Distribution warehouses are massive. The facility in question was over 400,000 square feet. During the day, it employed over 200 people, forklifts moving constantly, conveyor belts running, trucks loading and unloading. But the night shift was different. Only 15 people worked overnight. Their job was to prepare the next day's shipments, conduct inventory, and handle any overnight delivery trucks. Patricia Evans was the night shift supervisor. She'd been with the company for 8 years. She was known for being no-nonsense, practical, and completely unflappable. Until March 2021. The warehouse had a section called the Old Storage Area, a part of the building that dated back to the 1970s, before the major expansion. It was still used, but less frequently, mostly for overstock and items that didn't move quickly. The old storage area had a reputation. Workers didn't like going back there, especially at night. They'd report feelings of being watched. Some claimed to hear footsteps when no one else was around. A few had seen shadows moving between the racks. Patricia dismissed all of it as superstition and the overactive imaginations of tired workers, until she had to retrieve something from the old storage area herself. It was 1:15 a.m. An urgent order had come through for a part that was only stored in the old section. Patricia's crew was busy with other tasks, so she decided to get it herself. She took a radio and a flashlight. The old section's lighting was poor. Half the fixtures were burned out and hadn't been replaced yet. As Patricia walked down the main aisle, her footsteps echoing off the concrete, she understood why her crew felt uneasy back here. It felt isolated, detached from the rest of the building. The shadows seemed darker, the silence more oppressive. She found the part she needed on rack 47 about a quarter mile into the section. As she was scanning the barcode into her handheld device, she heard something that made her freeze. Footsteps, not her own, someone else's, coming from deeper in the old storage area where no one should be. Patricia called out, "Who's there? This is a restricted area." The footsteps stopped. She waited. Silence. "This is Patricia, the night supervisor. You need to identify yourself immediately." Nothing. She raised her radio to call security, but before she could press the button, the footsteps resumed. This time they were moving, fast, running, toward her. Patricia didn't wait. She ran back toward the entrance, the heavy parts still clutched in her hands. Behind her, the footsteps were gaining, fast, too fast. She could hear breathing, ragged, desperate. Patricia burst through the door back into the main warehouse area. Her crew looked up, startled by her disheveled appearance. "There's someone in the old section," she shouted. "Call security." Security arrived within 3 minutes. They searched the old storage area thoroughly. They found nothing, no one, not even evidence that anyone had been there. But they did find something strange. On the floor, in the exact area where Patricia had heard the footsteps, there was a trail. Not footprints exactly, more like drag marks, as if something heavy had been pulled across the concrete. The marks led to a section of the wall that had been sealed off years ago, part of an old loading dock that was no longer in use. When facilities management was called to investigate, they found that the sealed doorway had been disturbed. The metal panel that covered it had been bent outward from the inside recently. Behind the panel was the old loading dock, a small room, maybe 20 feet by 20 feet. It hadn't been accessed in over a decade, but someone had been inside. On the floor of the dock, they found evidence of habitation, food wrappers, empty water bottles, a sleeping bag, and most disturbing of all, photographs. Dozens of photographs. Pinned to the wall, they were pictures of warehouse employees, taken from a distance, some during the day, some at night. Pictures of them working, pictures of them leaving the building, pictures of them in the parking lot, and there were pictures of Patricia. In several photos, Patricia had been circled in red marker. There were notes written on the images. Most were illegible, but one was clear. Night shift, always alone in old section, access to office keys. Police were called immediately. A manhunt was conducted, but whoever had been living in the sealed loading dock had already abandoned it. DNA evidence was collected, fingerprints were found, but they didn't match anyone in the system. The police theorized that someone, likely unhoused or evading law enforcement, had found a way into the old dock months earlier. They'd been living there, watching, planning. Planning what exactly was never determined. Patricia took a week off work. When she returned, she put in her notice. She couldn't shake the feeling that she'd been moments away from something terrible. When I heard those footsteps chasing me, she told investigators, I knew that whoever it was, they weren't just trying to scare me, they were trying to catch me. And if they had, I don't know what would have happened. But I know I'm lucky I was fast enough. The warehouse increased security. They sealed the old loading dock permanently. They installed better lighting and cameras throughout the old storage area, but the night shift crew was never the same. Several workers quit. Others requested transfers to day shift, and sometimes employees still report hearing footsteps in the old section, footsteps that don't belong to anyone on the clock. 4 stories, 4 night shift workers who encountered something that shattered their sense of safety. Something that made them realize that the world after dark is fundamentally different and sometimes dangerous in ways we can't predict. Marcus, the hospital security guard, who saw something what shouldn't have existed. Sarah, the gas station attendant, who was stalked by someone who'd found a way inside. Jamal, the office cleaner, who may have communicated with someone who didn't know they were dead. And Patricia, the warehouse supervisor, who discovered she'd been watched for months by someone with unknown intentions. These stories share common elements: isolation, vulnerability, the sense that when you're working while everyone else sleeps, you're operating in a space between the normal world and something else, something that doesn't follow the rules. If you work a night shift, these stories might resonate with you. You might have your own experiences. That strange feeling you can't explain, that moment when you were certain you weren't alone, you're not crazy, and you're not the only one. The night shift workers who shared their stories for this video all had one piece of advice: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't stay just because you need the job. Don't investigate just because you're curious. Some things that happen at night are better left in the dark. Thank you for watching. If you have your own night shift story, I'd like to hear it. You can share it in the comments below, or if you'd prefer, there's a mailbox in the description where you can submit anonymously. Stay safe out there, especially if you work while the world sleeps.